Certain words in our lexicon, they mean 100 different things to 100 different people. Success or health or love. Everyone's got a different definition of exactly what that means. And the term financial planning, I found, is equally hard to pin down. Doubly so when someone asks, how will I know if my financial plan is working? How will I know if the act of financial planning would be a positive thing for me? What does that look like? So that's what today's episode is all about. The steps to take, what it looks like, and how you can measure your financial planning success. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors, where every episode teaches you personal finance and long-term investing in simple terms. Now, here's your host, Jesse Kramer.
Welcome to Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors, episode 148. I'm Jesse Kramer. I'm a financial planner. I work with retirees and people getting ready for retirement from all across the USA. If you're looking for retirement planning help, you can learn more at planwithjesse.com. Our review of the week is from KPK1978, who left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and who called out the, quote, genuine level-headed financial advice, end quote, on this podcast. I'm glad you like it, KPK, and thank you for the rating and review. You can send me an email to jesse@bestinterest.blog, and I will get you hooked up with a super soft t-shirt. I will get it sent out in the mail to you, KPK. Thank you again. And let's get into today's episode. Financial planning, that phrase itself is a little hard to pin down. People know what a bank account is. They know what life insurance is. They know about the stock market, or at least a little bit about it. But financial planning, fewer people know what that entails. Funnily enough, a few weeks ago, I was chatting with Jonathan. Shout out to you, Jonathan. You might be listening right now. Jonathan is a listener of the podcast. And Jonathan was asking me about possibly working together. And I said something like, well, are you looking for someone to manage your portfolio for you, Jonathan? Or are you just looking for kind of financial planning all on its own? And Jonathan had a great response. He goes, well, what does that mean? Financial planning only? Like, what does that entail? And that's a great question. And his question helped me inspire today's episode. Another inspiration for this episode came from a fellow financial planner colleague of mine. He was talking to a client who asked him the following question. Let's fast forward 1 or 2 or 5 years from now. When I look backward, how will I know if my financial plan has been successful or not? Okay, now that is a great question too. So let's dive into some of that today. Let's answer some of those questions. But first, let's make sure we're on the same page. What exactly is financial planning? Well, the CFP Board, that's the Certified Financial Planning Board. The CFP Board, you might have heard of CFP Financial Advisors. It's probably the biggest and most well-respected designation specifically in the world of financial planning. And the CFP Board describes the act of financial planning as the process of determining whether and how an individual, a person, can meet their life goals through the proper management of financial resources. It typically involves looking at a person's entire financial picture, their cash flow, their insurance, investments, taxes, retirement, and estate matters, and coordinating them into a unified strategy. I think that's a great definition, everybody. We look at all the pieces in your financial life, and we create a unified strategy for kind of solving that financial puzzle. Now, the FPA, which is the Financial Planning Association, just a different industry association, they say that a financial plan is a comprehensive evaluation of a person's current and future financial state using known variables to predict future cash flows, asset values, and withdrawal plans. It's often described as a roadmap for reaching specific life and financial goals built around a defined process of gathering data, setting goals, analyzing, recommending, implementing, and monitoring. And then a typical textbook-style definition is that a financial plan is a document that details a person's current financial state, their income, expenses, assets, and debts, along with their financial goals, and lays out the strategies they'll use to achieve those goals, often covering budgeting, investing, insurance, taxes, retirement, and estate planning. So, what do these 3 different definitions, or just about any good definition of financial planning, have in common? First, they all mention goals. Second, they all mention the fact that there's many different aspects of personal finance involved in a financial plan. Third, they all mention a process of planning itself. And then fourth, they all mention that the output of the process is some sort of strategy that you can take with you and start to use. So goals, multiple aspects of personal finance, process, and strategy. So if a financial plan is some sort of strategy to move you into your future, you've got to know where you actually want to go. And that's why goals are vital. Without goals, saving and investing are directionless. And when you set clear financial goals, whether it's buying a house or retiring comfortably or funding your kid's college education or simply building an emergency fund, you create some sort of destination on your map. So goals provide that purpose. It's easier to resist, say, impulse purchases when you're working towards something meaningful, some real goal with some sort of purpose. Goals also provide timelines, helping you determine your investment strategy. A goal that's 30 years away, like retirement, allows for much more aggressive growth investments, while a goal that's only 2 years away, like a down payment, calls for safer, more liquid investments. Goals also allow you to measure progress by breaking larger objectives into specific quantifiable targets, like save $50,000 for a down payment over the next 5 years. If that's your goal, you can then calculate exactly how much you have to save monthly, and then you can start to track whether you're on pace. Goals also help us prioritize competing financial demands. If your resources are limited, having clearly ranked goals can help you decide where to direct your money first and foremost. So in short, goals turn financial planning from guesswork into a strategic and personal process that's aligned with what truly matters to you. In other words, financial planning is such a wonderfully unique and specific exercise because your goals are going to be unique to you and your family. Even if your numbers end up looking similar to another family's numbers, your plans are going to have big fundamental differences because your goals are going to be different than that other family's goals. After goals, the second thing we talked about that every definition of financial planning has in common is that it has many different aspects of personal finance built into it. So if you've never reviewed your tax return, you might have errors in your financial plan. If you haven't checked your estate documents in the last 10 years, you might have errors in your financial plan. Same if your investment strategy hasn't really changed since you started your career. Financial planning is more than just one little thing. It's a web of interconnected pieces. And ignoring any of those pieces could leave a dangerous gap in your plan. Those gaps mean that you could be rock solid in most places in your financial plan, yet still have a risk, lots of risks built into your plan. I'll use that word again, interconnected. Each piece of your financial life, investments, taxes, insurance, estate planning, simple cash flow, debt management, each of those pieces affects the others. A tax-efficient withdrawal strategy in retirement, well, it depends on how your assets are structured. Your insurance needs will shift as your estate plan evolves. Your investment risk tolerance should adjust as your income sources change. True financial planning means looking at that whole picture, not just the parts that feel the most urgent or feel the most familiar. It means maybe asking some uncomfortable questions. What am I not looking at? What haven't I updated in years? What's connected to this that I haven't actually considered yet? So the second big part of any good financial planning definition is the fact that it's multifaceted and interconnected. The third thing that we talked about a minute ago is the fact that good financial planning follows a process. And when I read the online forums and see what other people out there are doing, this idea of a process is more overlooked than any of the other four things I mentioned. Lots of people think about their goals. Plenty of people include all the financial pieces in their plans. And what we'll get to next is that, of course, everybody wants a long-term strategy to be the output of what they do here. But too many people ignore the smart process of financial planning. Now, going back to the CFP Board, they have a very specific process. It's fairly regimented in nature. First, they would recommend that you establish a relationship and determine your goals. So the relationship part would be for me if I'm working with someone as a client. But if you're just doing it on your own, then step number one then is determine your goals. Okay. Step two is gather data. Step three is analyze and assess. Step four is develop recommendations. Step five is present those recommendations, which again would be maybe something more if you're client facing. But either way, develop and present recommendations is one of the steps. Next comes implementing those recommendations, and then the last step is to monitor the plan and revisit it. So this is essentially a rebranded kind of standard problem-solving process. It maps pretty closely onto just a general management consulting methodology of defining the scope, diagnosing what's wrong, recommending solutions, implementing and executing those solutions, and then reviewing and follow up. And you'll notice that making any actual changes, which is the implement step, it's actually the sixth of the 7 steps in the financial planning process. I think it's common to see people say things like, I'm 55 years old, my portfolio is currently 100% stocks. How should I be invested instead? And it's a great question, but they are jumping in their question straight to a recommendation. That's what they're looking for. They're looking to implement some change. But based on what that person said, we have no idea what their goals are. We've barely gathered any data about them. We only know their age and their current allocation. We've done no sort of analysis whatsoever. There's no way that we could make a reasonable recommendation in this scenario. And that's why the process of financial planning is so important. It's not just about getting the answer to a person as fast as possible. There is a process in place, and it's important that it's there. Here's a quick ad, and then we'll get back to the show. Did you know my written blog, The Best Interest, was nominated for 2022 Personal Finance Blog of the Year, and it's been highlighted in the Wall Street Journal, Yahoo Finance, and on CNBC? I love writing, especially when that writing is to share financial education, and I usually write 1 or 2 articles per week. You can read them all at bestinterest.blog. Again, the web address is bestinterest.blog. Check it out. And that brings us to the outcome of financial planning, which I've called a strategy. A good strategy is more of like a financial philosophy that connects advice to specific goals of the individual or the family. It touches on all the various moving pieces. It's maybe a little like any successful sports team. A winning team doesn't just have a series of good plays or a series of winning actions. They have instead some sort of cohesive strategy underneath everything they do. And so whether you're a player on that team or a coach on the team or an observer of the team, you can see that strategy at play in everything they do. And it makes it easier to be a player or a coach on that team because if you're ever unsure of what your next steps ought to look like, you can consult the overall strategy to help guide you. So what's an example of this? Let's say we have a mid-40s couple with 2 kids. They're a dual income couple. Their goals are to retire comfortably by age 60, to fund the 2 kids' college starting in 8 and 10 years, and to keep a safety margin against a job loss. Their current state is that they have solid 401k balances. They have some cash on hand. They don't have life insurance. They have a mortgage. They are investing their extra money kind of on a reactive basis whenever it comes up in their conversations. So a cohesive strategy for them, it might look like 1, cash flow is the foundation of that everything else depends on, which is probably not true just for this couple. It's probably true for everybody. But either way, their first part of their cohesive strategy is that cash flow is their foundation. The second aspect of their plan would be their investment allocation, and it needs to be split by time horizon, not just based on risk tolerance. So what do I mean there? I mean that their college savings probably going to go into 529 accounts. Maybe some of it's going to go into a taxable brokerage account as well. That's something I would recommend. But it's based on the fact that their kids are going to be going to college in 8 and 10 years, respectively. So they might be in some sort of age-based glide path. The time horizon dictates the risk that's taken there. But then their retirement, which to them, based on how they've described themselves, might be 15 years out. That's going to be a little more aggressive. It's going to be in their 401ks and their Roth accounts, but some also in their taxable brokerage account too. Because the time horizon is long enough and their emergency fund is already there, plus some insurance, which I'll talk about next, is already there to absorb near-term shocks. Their retirement money doesn't need to be conservative at all, and it doesn't need to compensate for any other risks. So that's number 2, investment allocation. Number 3, the third pillar of their financial plan is life insurance. They don't have any now, but they need some because they're relying on both incomes to hit their goals. They both need some sort of term life policy. And assuming their incomes are the same, I just quoted out a 20-year term policy, a $1.5 million policy for each of them, which is sized to cover, ideally, their remaining mortgage, replacing some of their lost income stream long enough for the surviving spouse to adjust, plus helping to fund the kids' college. And it's all independent of market performance. So that insurance number is reverse engineered from the plan's other goals, right? It's not just picked off of some chart or some sort of like multiple of income formula. That insurance number is based on their goals. Number 4 would be a tax strategy. That again, the tax strategy is unique based on their specific savings goals and their income and their retirement dates. So given their current and future estimated tax brackets, their smartest order of investment accounts of contributions would be to max out their 401k pre-tax to reduce taxable income right now, then contribute to 529 accounts to achieve their college funding goal, then to max out their HSA accounts for the triple tax advantage, then they continue to contribute to a backdoor Roth for some tax-free growth in retirement, then any remaining dollars would probably go into a taxable brokerage account, which partially could be used to help with the college funding, but also helps preserve flexibility before age 59 and a half. Since, yes, they're retiring at age 60, but who knows? Maybe they'll end up retiring a few years early. And of course, there are different ways to tap into your retirement accounts, even if you retire before age 59 and a half. But it's also nice to have a taxable brokerage account there too. Having those different buckets of monies, tax-free, tax-deferred, taxable, all very helpful. And then the 5th component of their financial plan, and again, this is just a very simple one, but their estate documents lock in the intent behind everything we just talked about. So having wills, guardianship designations, beneficiary designations, powers of attorney, healthcare proxy, all those kind of things help protect them from some pretty big risks that the other parts of their financial plan don't really protect them from. I mean, none of the income replacement or college funding logic works if a beneficiary form on one of those things still points to the wrong person or an ex-employer default or nobody at all. So one of the ideas here that I'm trying to get across to you is that a financial plan really is some sort of cohesive strategy. So how exactly is this thing that I just described a cohesive strategy and not just 5 separate plans kind of stapled together into one packet? Well, if we think through what might change in their financial plan, I think that's a really good lens through which to answer this question. If they decide to retire at age 55 instead of age 60, for example, their taxable account, that bridge to retirement, probably needs to be bigger, which means their saving rates into it change, which means maybe less money goes into the 529 accounts or goes into the traditional retirement accounts. And that could change the college glide path. It could change their tax planning on an annual basis. I think of these different interconnected components of financial plan like a spider web. And you kind of touch on the web over here, and you're not really fully aware of how the kind of ripples will echo throughout the spider web itself because everything's connected and you're not quite sure what's pulling on what. Ideally, good financial planning helps illuminate what's pulling on what. So that way you can understand, if we do pull back our retirement age by 5 years, here are all the interconnected kind of ramifications of that. And then a second one, I realize I think I described these people in their mid-40s. So they probably aren't having a third kid, but you never know. If they do end up having a third child, their insurance number, their 529 targets, I would probably argue their retirement date itself will all shift in response to that. And again, it's important to think about, how would their estate documents need to change? How would their tax strategy change if they do end up working till 65 instead of 60? How are all these components changing? How is this one strategy changing based on things that shift inside of your life? Now, I want to pause here because I think there are, of course, some different schools of thought in how to determine your goals and which financial aspects are most important to understand and which process to use and what the final strategy ought to look like. Meaning, I've seen some firms deliver 100-page financial plans. I'm really not a fan of that. In my opinion, probably 90 or 95% of those 100 pages are junk anyway. And then on the other end of the spectrum, Carl Richards, who was a guest here on episode 83, by the way, of this podcast, Carl Richards talks about a 1-page financial plan that simply contains values and goals. That's it. Whenever Carl needs to make a decision, he evaluates that decision through the filter of his values and goals, the 1-page plan. So for Carl, his 1-page financial plan literally says, for his values, time with family, mainly outside. And number 2, serving in the community. And then his goals are 1, invest in my business, 2, fund experiences and education for the kids, and then 3, fund freedom. Boom, that's it. I think Carl very intentionally decided to kind of cut down on words as much as possible. Good for him, keep it simple. But that is his 1-page financial plan. And I think what Carl has done there is a fantastic example of the goals section of a good financial plan. But even Carl admits himself that his 1-pager is missing details, of course, and those details are going to be important to about 99% of us. But anyway, my whole point here is that there's different ways to approach it, different ways to create your goals, different ways to go about the process, because then you have ideas like George Kinder's life planning questions. Again, these questions are meant to set you off on your financial plan by discovering your goals again. So this is a unique take on how to go through the goal discovery process. George Kinder, 3 different questions. That's it. That's all he asks so that you can figure out your financial goals or just your life goals, I guess, really. And his 3 questions are, question 1, imagine you are financially secure. You have enough money to take care of your needs now and in the future. How would you live your life? What would you do with the money? Would you change anything? Let yourself dream. Question number 2. Now imagine you visit your doctor who tells you that you have 5 to 10 years left to live. You won't ever feel sick, but you will have no notice of your moment of death. What will you do in the time that you have remaining? Will you change your life? How will you live out your remaining years? And then question number 3, finally, imagine your doctor shocks you with the news that you have just 24 hours left to live. Notice what feelings arise as you confront your very real mortality. What did you miss? What did you not get to be? What did you not get to do? So question number 1 removes money as a constraint. It's just about uncovering your broad, big values and desires. Question number 2 adds some mortality into the mix. Time, it becomes limited, and that ought to sharpen your priorities a bit. And then question number 3 hits the hardest, forces us to reflect on regrets and identity and meaning. My point here is simply that there are different ways to create your financial plan. In this case, there are many different ways to construct your goals, right? That's my takeaway that I hope you take with you from George Kinder's 3 questions is just, okay, it's an interesting and new and novel way to think about the goals that go into a financial plan. But there are also different ways to consider how much risk, for example, you ought to have in your plan. There are different schools of thought on which investments make sense inside of your portfolio, which is part of your financial plan. But there is not, or should not be, much variation away from the fact that a good financial plan involves the determination of goals, a full reconciliation of the many moving pieces in your financial life, a process that leads you from measurement to analysis to implementation, and then a comprehensive strategy as your final product. That fact, kind of no matter whether you're doing a George Kinder's questions, whether you're doing the Carl Richards one-page plan, whether you're a risk parity investor, whether you're a boglehead, like no matter what, your financial planning still is going to involve those 4 steps: goals, many moving pieces, a process, and a strategy. One interesting note here, what if your goals change? Because they almost always will. What if your finances change? Your income, your portfolio returns. What if you get a big inheritance? Because those kind of things will happen to almost all of us at different times. What if your life changes? Well, we know that your kids will grow older. They'll leave the nest. Your responsibilities at work might ebb and flow. 1,000 different other things are going to change in life. The point being, the major inputs into your financial plan are going to change over time, and therefore the major output of your financial plan must change too, right? And the answer is yes, it does. It will. Financial planning is a dynamic process. It is not a static process. It is not a one and done process. I'm fine with the idea of one-time financial plans being a product of the financial planning industry, but only if the family in question decides to either update their financial plan on their own, that's fine, or they decide to come back in the future for a refreshed financial plan. It cannot be a static one-time thing. It has to be a dynamic process. Financial planning is dynamic because life is dynamic, one and the same. Here's a quick ad, and then we'll get back to the show. I send a free weekly email to thousands of readers that shares 2 simple things, just 2. The first are my new articles and podcasts, so you'll never miss when I publish new content. And the second is my favorite financial content from other corners of the internet, so you can see what's been helping me the most.
But Jesse, I don't want another email.
I hear you. I make this newsletter short, sweet, and full of essential information, and readers enjoy that. About 85% of newsletter subscribers are engaging with the newsletter more than once a month. They're enjoying it, and you will too. You can subscribe for free on the homepage at bestinterest.blog, and you'll get a free PDF of my white paper titled The Step-by-Step Guide to Building Your Retirement Paycheck. That's right, a free weekly email that thousands of people like you are already reading, a free white paper to help you plan for retirement, and you can sign up for free at bestinterest.blog. So let's now pivot finally to the question, how will you know that your financial plan, your continued dynamic financial planning, is going successfully? It's going well. How do we know that it's working for you? Will there be loud blinking lights to tell you? Is it simply a matter of having more money more quickly? And as the bank account, as the investment accounts go up, you know you're successful? Is it a feeling that you get? Or is it just something impossible to measure, impossible to put your finger on, impossible to know for sure? How do we know that financial planning is going well for you? Well, I say there's no single metric because, as we've already established, there's a mix of behavioral and financial and emotional components that go into a financial plan. But let me just start listing out. I kind of went through different ideas, different thoughts, different experts, and I put together a list of 22 items. And it's almost like 22 anecdotes or 22 different ways, 22 different examples that I could think of where it's like, yeah, well, clearly something in your financial plan is going right if you can put yourself in the shoes of these 22 examples. I'm just going to start going through them. Number 1, of course, you'll know that your financial plan is working if you can clearly see and measure the financial progress that you've made towards your goals. No doubt about it. If you had $1 million invested in 2010 and $2 million by 2020 and $3 million here today in 2026, that's a good sign that your financial plan is working. But it's far from the only sign. And candidly, it's not a guarantee that you have a bulletproof plan. So that's the other thing is these are 22, this list of 22 isn't 22 separate things, but more likely it's the kind of thing where the more of these 22 things that you can certainly check off in your life, the more likely you are to have a great financial plan. And if there are some of these 22 things that you hear and you're like, no, there's no chance that that applies to me, odds are you have a hole in your financial plan. I think that's how you should take this list. So anyway, number one, again, was if you can clearly measure your financial progress in dollar terms, that's a good sign that you've got a financial plan that's working. Number two is that you can answer hard questions about your finances, like, what if I lost my job tomorrow? It's not that life would become easy if you lost your job tomorrow because you have a financial plan. That's not what I'm saying. It would still be a hard situation. But the fact is that you wouldn't be forced to make a hard decision in the moment, in the middle of the storm, per se, caused by losing your job. You wouldn't have to make a hard decision. Your financial plan would have already taken some of that risk into account, and it would give you time to make a better decision. So again, if you have answers to those kind of hard questions about your finances, there's a good chance you have a pretty good financial plan. Number three, you've uncovered blind spots. I think one of my more rewarding feelings over the past 4 years has been when I've worked with someone who decided to work with me with a little skepticism. And not skepticism about me necessarily, but it's more skepticism about whether any financial planner could actually improve on their current scenario. But then we end up uncovering some blind spots together, showing this person something that they never actually realized in the first place. And it's this eureka moment for them. Aha, they learn this is why good financial planning is important. So that's number three. Number four, your financial planning is going well if you've learned or internalized new information about your financial life. For example, someone might say, I know I have life insurance, but I don't really know what type or how much the policy is or when the policy expires. Well, if we can get this person to the point where they know, oh, right, I've got a term policy for $2 million and it's good until I'm 57 years old. That's a good sign. And it's not that they need to memorize facts about their finances. That's not it. But it's a sign that they've gained much more familiarity with their own financial picture. Now, the other side of this coin would be that you're no longer losing sleep over things like, is my estate plan in an okay place? Did I set up a beneficiary on that old IRA account at Fidelity? Have I actually been filing my taxes the right way all these years? So you'll know that your financial planning process has been good if those kind of worries that keep you up at night, if they start to simmer down, because hopefully you know that you're in an okay place. So that's a good sign that your financial plan is working. Number five, if you've gained more alignment with your partner or other family members about what they want out of life and how they want your shared financial assets to help accomplish those dreams. Especially when it comes to goal setting, financial planning is a wonderful way to ensure that you and your family members are truly rowing in the same direction. Number six, if you're making fewer emotional one-off financial decisions, that's a good sign. It could be investing related. You know, the market drops, a friend gives you their hot stock tip at a party, you see a scary headline, and you basically don't have a reaction to those things. Or your siblings call up to see if you want to buy a timeshare with them in some beautiful place, and you decide to evaluate the decision against what your financial plan says. Or if a good friend suddenly passes away, and it really makes you think about your life, but now you have a process to go through to determine if and how your financial plan ought to change due to rethinking your life. So rather than making kind of big emotional decisions, if you're making fewer of those kind of one-off financial decisions, that's a good sign that your financial plan is working. You'll know, number seven, you'll know that your plan is going well if decisions get easier over time. Early on in the financial planning process, big questions take some real effort and time. But a few years in, as more and more of your puzzle pieces have fallen into place, the decisions you make should get easier and easier. Number eight, a good signal is that you can explain your own plan pretty simply. If you can't summarize your high-level financial planning strategy in a minute on one piece of paper, then you might not understand it well enough. It'd be the kind of summary where you lead with your values and goals, you explain a couple of the most vital timelines in your plan, you understand the short and the long-term financial requirements to meet those goals over those timelines, et cetera, et cetera. Number 9 is that you know your why. Or stealing from Carl Richards again, you have a bigger yes. You have this big, clear reason to say no to many, many things in life because your financial plan has given you a bigger yes targeted toward your specific goals. If you feel that way, that's a great sign. Number 10, and now we're moving on to some of the more hard financial signs that you've got a good financial plan. Number 10, your savings rate is stable or rising or simply moving in a very predictable way that you understand, even as life throws expenses at you. Because you're measuring and monitoring your cash flow, because you're reviewing it regularly, because your spending naturally sits below what you earn, all those things mean that your savings rate is stable or rising or very predictable, and that's a very good sign. Number 11 is that you're hitting the boring financial milestones, so to speak, roughly on schedule. Your emergency fund being fully funded, your debt pay down very much on schedule or ahead of schedule. Your contribution rates into various investment accounts are stable or increasing as your income increases. Your portfolio balances are going up, at least over long enough periods of time where you can kind of depend on some investment returns. And all that feels on schedule, relatively boring, just like check the box. That's great. That's a really good thing. It's a really good sign that your plan is working. Number 12, you no longer feel like you are rating your savings. That's RAID, like a rater. You're rating your savings for things that used to feel like emergencies. So a car repair or a medical bill. Those kind of things are just now part of normal life, and you have money specifically set aside to cover those things. Number 13, you can tie specific reasons for your good financial behaviors, meaning a lot of people, they save money every year, and that's great. And the reason why they save money is because they kind of shrug their shoulders and they say, I don't know, saving is good, and more saving is better than less saving. And I don't really know what I'm saving for exactly, but I'm saving money anyway. And in fairness, that's fine, but I think it's a lot more powerful to say, my goal is to save $70,000 this year because that's what I need in order to retire by 55. And because that's one of the major takeaways from my financial plan. It's what my wife and I decided was extremely important to us. Boom. That is awesome. And that's a very specific reason that you can tie to your good financial behavior. And the more you can do that, the better off you are and the better your financial plan is going. Now, starting here with number 14, what are some of the lived experiences that could signal that your financial plan is working great? Here's a good one. A market downturn happens and your reaction is basically, yeah, this is totally expected. And any sort of panic selling or panic reading of the news is just non-existent for you. Number 15 here, someone asks you for financial advice and you find yourself with a clear and calm answer that ends up teaching them a little bit about the financial planning process that you went through. It's not that you're giving them advice without knowing anything about them, but you're realizing that the financial planning process that worked for you is also going to work for them. So that's a really good sign. Number 16, a big windfall, say, falls into your lap, or maybe on the other side, a big unplanned expense shows up and you already know exactly how you're going to handle it. So again, if it's a big windfall, it could be a bonus or an inheritance ends up on your lap. And you don't even really have to think about what you're going to do with the money. You already know what you're going to do with it. That's a really good sign. Number 17, I really like this one. I think you might like it too, is that you stop thinking about money constantly. I think paradoxically, a well-functioning financial plan should mean that money occupies a lot less of your daily headspace, not more, because the system, the plan itself, is handling all the thinking for you. This is a particularly interesting one because I know some of you listening right now, and I know the way you think about your personal finances, and you're thinking about them a lot. And now, if that's coming from a place of curiosity and positivity, almost like a favorite hobby, I totally get it. I really do. But if it's coming from a place with a little bit of anxiety or concern or negativity, or that idea of, if I don't have my hands on the wheel at all times, then I'm going to end up in the ditch, that's pretty bad. And good financial planning is like having an expert driver or an expert pilot on your side, where you don't have to have your hands on the wheel because someone else does or something else does. And a good financial plan means that you should stop thinking about money constantly, or you should certainly think about money a lot less. Number 18, if your spouse asks you, hey, could we afford X? Could we afford a new car? Could we afford to go on a big trip this year? You can actually answer that in a minute or two by pulling up some numbers in your financial plan instead of giving them that vague, well, I don't know, or maybe, or I honestly have no idea, followed up by some anxiety later. So when you can actually answer those, can we afford X questions? That's a good sign. Number 19, you and your some family member of yours, you and your spouse, you disagree about a purchase, but you're arguing about the values, meaning do we actually want to prioritize that travel? Or would we rather put that money in the house fund? You're having a disagreement about values rather than having a disagreement about facts, which would be, we don't have enough money. We haven't saved any of that. So when the plan is working, the numbers are the boring part and the conversation is much more focused on the priorities set by your values and goals. Number 20, you stop comparing your portfolio size or your returns to that of a coworker or a stranger on the internet. And it's not that you don't care. It's just that you've internalized the fact that your plan is built around your goals and your timeline. There's not a shared leaderboard out there. It's really just about you. Number 21, is you go through a down market year like 2022, and your main takeaway afterward is that's fine, or that's why I own a lot of different assets, or this is why I have short-term money and long-term money. And the market dip simply becomes confirmation of the fact that your plan is working as designed. And last one, number 22, is that you feel more permission. Plain and simple, more permission. You feel a lot less hesitation and a lot more permission inside your personal finances, and that's given to you. It's created by the plan. When your financial plan is going well, you have answers to questions that used to paralyze you. You have answers to questions that you didn't know existed. You have answers to big questions in your life, which allows you to recognize and ignore the inconsequential questions. Money concerns fade away rather than constantly simmer. You and your family align on shared goals. Emotional financial decisions tend to drop off. Choices get easier over time. You can explain your strategy in a minute. Milestones get hit predictably. Market dips or big windfalls or big purchases feel calm and expected instead of stressful, because decisions about those things were made in advance, not made in the moment. So in conclusion today, financial planning can be hard to put your finger on. It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. It involves hard to measure relationships and feelings and concerns, and thus determining the success of financial planning isn't like something we can do with a stopwatch or a yardstick, but by establishing goals, by collecting detailed information, by working through a sound process, by building a long-term strategy, we know that financial planning is a terrific exercise. It really works. It works because it moves your hardest decisions out of the moments of stress and into moments of calm. It replaces emotional in-the-moment reactions with a process that you've already thought through, a process that you trust more than your instincts, or you should trust more than your instincts. Rather than trying to predict the future, a financial plan gives you a clear, pre-decided response to whatever the future brings. It translates your abstract values like freedom or security or travel into concrete numbers and timelines that you can act on. It gives you that bigger yes that makes it easier to say no to everything else that doesn't serve the bigger yes. It lightens your mental load, a good one. It's simple enough to actually follow it. This process becomes self-reinforcing because small, consistent, sometimes boring decisions, repeated over many years, they compound into an outcome far larger than any single decision could produce on its own. That's how you know your financial plan is successful. Thank you for tuning in today. You can subscribe to my weekly email on the homepage at bestinterest.blog. If you love this podcast, please leave me a rating and review on the Apple Podcast app. And if you're interested in learning more about my financial planning practice, visit planwithjesse.com.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors. If you have a question for Jesse to answer on a future episode, send him an email over at his blog, The Best Interest. His email address is jesse@bestinterest.blog. Again, that's jesse@bestinterest.blog. Did you enjoy the show? Subscribe, rate, and review the podcast wherever you listen. This helps others find the show and invest in knowledge themselves. And we really appreciate it. We'll catch you on the next episode of Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors. Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors is a personal podcast meant for education and entertainment. It should not be taken as financial advice, and it's not prescriptive of your financial situation.